The website is www.vcic.info, I-N-F-O, and I will put that in the chat. And Terry, I'm going to let you take it over and introduce Mike. I think that's all I've got to say.
Okay, and I see you are recording.
And Mike will have a slide on that information also.
Right.
So I would like to introduce Rabbi Michael Lotker, a friend, and I call him a colleague. So Rabbi Mike Lotker comes to us with a wealth of experience, a Phi Beta Kappa Magna Cum Laude physicist. He spent the bulk of his first career in the alternative energy business, working in wind power, solar, and geothermal energy. About 500 of the windmills that you've seen in Palm Springs were financed and installed by a company that Mike was president of. Mike has served synagogues in Montana, Arizona, and California. And I know he's visited synagogues around the world, including in South America. In 2003, he was ordained as a rabbi at Hebrew Union College in Los Angeles, where he also received his Master of Hebrew Letters degree. His rabbinic thesis addressed the theology of Jewish-Christian partnership. He presently is Rabbi Emeritus of Temple Narami in Camarillo, California, Rabbi of Congregation Kilat Aha Alonim in Ojai, California, and the Community Rabbi for the Jewish Federation of Ventura County. He is a member of the Central Conference of American Rabbis, the Board of Rabbis of Southern California, the editorial advisory board of the Ventura County Star newspaper, and lectures at several area colleges and universities. In addition to his studies, Mike has recently published a book for the Paulist Press entitled A Christian's Guide to Judaism. And Mike, I want to add, aren't you associated now with Temple Elohim in Thousand Oaks as education? You're muted. No? You're muted. So I will turn this over for Rabbi Mike Lotker to moderate the rest of the evening.
Okay,
Correct
thank you.
Me. Did I say the wrong temple?
No. I'm a scholar in residence at Temple Adat Elohim in Thousand Oaks.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you for that introduction. We have 51 people, so this is wonderful. We really appreciate it. I am going to use a very brief PowerPoint. Let's see, I want to share sound too. So here we go. So as you can see, the title of our program tonight is The Meaning of Life, hosted by the Ventura County Interfaith community. And we have three panelists, and I will introduce them in a moment, my two colleagues in a moment, representing Bahá'í, Trinitarian Christianity, and Judaism. And generally speaking, the focus of our discussion will be around these questions. Why does the universe exist? Why does humanity exist? What is the meaning of life? And what is the meaning of my life? I just want to see what my next slide is. I can never remember. Oh, okay. So this is also important. Terry has explained about the Ventura County Interfaith community, and we will be having events in August and September, and there is the website. Generally, the plan for this evening in terms of timing and whatnot will be each of us will spend about 10 minutes discussing the questions. The three of us happen to have faith traditions that hold that there is a God. So when we originally phrased this question, we asked it in the following way: why did God create the universe? Why did God create humanity? What is the meaning of life, and what is the meaning of my life? And then we'll give the panelists an opportunity to ask questions and comment on each other's discussion. And then we're going to have an open Q&A. And for the moment, our focus will be to use the chat window where you can type questions in, and Tim will be able to read the questions and call on you to, if you want to amplify or explain what you meant, and then maybe have a wrap up and a conclusion. I'm trying to see. I can never remember what I have. Okay, so here are the three of us. So let me discuss, just introduce the subject and to why I think it's so important. One of the things that made me religious, which is a distinct issue from believing in God, one of the things that made me religious was the following thought, the following logic. And that is that without God, there is no inherent or intrinsic meaning to life. What I mean by that is, you heard my first career is as a physicist, as a scientist. If there's no God, power and so on, then the truth of our world is simply a scientific truth. And it turns out that through some amazing
I don't have video. I don't
miracle,
know what I did.
Okay, Janice, you are unmuted. It turns out that there's through some amazing coincidence, we happen to have formed. We are self-aware organic hydrocarbons. And what is an organic hydrocarbon? If I burn an organic hydrocarbon, here's a sheet of paper. If I burn this sheet of paper, I will get carbon dioxide, I will get water vapor, and I will get a certain amount of energy. If I burn a baby, I will get carbon dioxide, I will get water vapor, and I will get a certain amount of energy. Biochemically speaking, scientifically speaking, there is no difference. I can't prove that's wrong, but I simply refuse to accept that. I believe that there is meaning to life, and I believe the meaning isn't self-invented. You can argue that we evolved,
Hi,
from
Terry.
slime mold. We evolved from slime mold.
I am
Janice,
unmuted.
you are now unmuted.
Okay.
You are fine. We evolved from slime mold, and here we are, and we've tricked ourselves into thinking there's meaning to our life. But without the concept of God, there really is no meaning to our life. So I can't prove that there is a God, or this line of investigation doesn't prove that there is a God, but I cannot live my life as though it's all a biological accident. So I will comment more about what Judaism says about the meaning of life and the meaning of the purpose of creation and so on when I get my own turn, and Tim is going to be keeping us on track on time. And so first I would like to, we're going in reverse order of the ages of the religious traditions. So Arash, representing the Baha'i religion, will be for, oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry, I'm not done yet. Sorry. So in this vein, I want to quote an amazing rabbi, Abraham Joshua Heschel, who talked about the reason different groups learned. The Greeks, he said, learned in order to comprehend, in order to understand. Skipping to the last one, he says, modern man, Western man learns in order to use, and the Hebrews learned in order to revere. The goal of learning in the Hebrew tradition was to appreciate the amazing nature of our universe and the amazing nature of God. So I want to take you on a brief, about 3-minute tour of the universe. So hold on. Oops, sorry. You now know my definition of awesome. Oh, I wonder if I can't even remember if I have another. I should have stayed in screen share. Sorry. So first, I would like to introduce Arash Payan, our Baha'i representative. And he is a native of Thousand Oaks, received his bachelor's and master's degrees in engineering from USC, where he met his wife, is blessed with wonderful twin daughters, and is a member of the Baha'i faith. In his spare time, he enjoys biking and hiking with his family, especially when temperatures are above 90 degrees. Yes, he loves the heat and keeps a spare space heater running in his office, even in the summers. Arash volunteers his time to teach a weekly junior youth empowerment course and assists with a weekly children's virtues class. He's also involved with the Ventura County Interfaith community and other interfaith activities such as monthly devotional via Zoom. He is a family man who strives to be a global citizen. Arash.
Thank you for the introduction. I have to admit the bio was written by my wife, so that was all her doing. So anyway, good evening, everyone. It was so nice to see so many faces here, so many friends, so many new faces. Thank you, Rabbi Locker, for introducing the meeting, and Terry, and to the whole VCIC for putting this on, hosting it, organizing it, and thank you all for all of you attending. I have a little bit of a slideshow as well to share with you guys, or a presentation, I should say. So I'm going to put that up on the screen right now, if you'll permit me. And before I get to the questions that are promised in the flyer, to answering those questions, I'm just going to give a brief overview of the faith, because I'm quite certain most of you don't know what the Baha'i faith is. So just to orient us all and give it some context, I'm going to take a few seconds to describe it. So the Baha'i faith is an independent religion founded in 1844 by Baha'u'llah, the promised one of the divine messengers. And Baha'u'llah means glory of God. It's a title. He delivered a new revelation from God to humanity, which spanned thousands of verses of letters and books. And in his writings, he described the model for the development of a global civilization that takes into account the spiritual and the material dimensions of human life. So today, the adherents of Baha'u'llah are all over the world, and they're known as Baha'is. And they span the entire globe, and daily study his teachings and work to implement them in their own lives. Not only in their own lives, but in the communities in which they live, and by extension, the entire world. And the beliefs of the Baha'is address themes as the oneness of God and his religion, the oneness of humanity and freedom from prejudice, the inherent nobility of human beings, the progressive revelation of religious truth, the development of spiritual qualities, the integration of worship and service, the fundamental equality of the sexes, the harmony between religion and science, which we often think are opposed, but actually are harmonious, the centrality of justice to all human endeavors, the importance of education, and the dynamics of the relationships that will bind together individuals, communities, and institutions, all as humanity advances towards its collective maturity in the future. So, with that little background out of the way, allow me to put forth an additional disclaimer that what I'm presenting here is my understanding of the Baha'i faith. It's to the best of my knowledge. I will, of course, be sharing some passages directly from the writings, but I personally have no rank, I have no title, so I'm just here to share my understanding of the faith and based on my own research. So don't go around saying Arash said everything about Baha'is is this and that, because I'm nobody. Anyway, so onto the slides, onto the presentation. So why did God create us? It's a fair question, and so I did a little dive into the Baha'i ratings for the answer, and I came up with a couple of passages that might help guide our discussion this evening. So this first one that I pulled is from an obligatory prayer, a prayer that Baha'is recite every day, once a day. And this is the opening line of it. It says, "I bear witness, O my God, that thou hast created me to know thee and to worship thee." So every day, when we say our obligatory prayer, we're reminding ourselves why God created us. We're testifying it. We're reciting it every day as a confirmation that we know and we understand why we were created. And so and when we say we're created to know God and to worship God, knowing God is one of those eternal quests that we go on for the rest of our lives, because knowing God, knowing our Creator, is something that, as the created, is an infinite journey, an eternal journey, which we'll never fully achieve, because God is ultimately unknowable. It's as if a painting can know its painter, or a loaf of bread can know its baker. Though we are marvelous creations, compared to God, we are almost nothing. But we grow to know God and to worship God, and that in itself takes on many forms. And we could have a whole other series on how different faiths worship. And there's this other passage I thought was relevant to the question at hand. It was, "Veiled in my immemorial being," and this is from the Hidden Words of Baha'u'llah, where, as if these are words from God to us, speaking to humanity. So God is saying, "Veiled in my immemorial being, and in the ancient eternity of my essence, I knew my love for thee. Therefore I created thee, have engraved on thee mine image, and revealed to thee my beauty." And so, as is so often in matters of true faith, actions spring from love, and our creation itself was an act of love, for God created us, and therefore God loved us, and therefore created us. And some of you might be thinking, well, that's a little paradoxical. How can you love something that hasn't been created? And I have two retorts to that. I'll explain the first retort with, I understand this through a metaphor that I use in my own life, is that I love my children. I love my daughters. And I loved them before we had them. I knew I loved my kids. I dreamt and loved the idea of my children long before I had any children. And I think, although it's an imperfect metaphor, I think it can kind of be used to help us grasp and understand this quote a little bit better. And secondly, I think this, to get a little more scientific in my understanding of this, in the Baha'i faith, we understand that God is unconstrained by space and time. And so when you're unconstrained by time, order of operations isn't relevant any longer. And so that, please take for that what you like, but that's my understanding. And so in these two quotes is a hint about the meaning or the purpose of our lives, which leads me to the next passage. The purpose of the creation of man is the attainment of the supreme virtues of humanity through descent of the heavenly bestowals, those gifts that we receive from the divine. And our goal is to attain and develop these virtues. As we saw in the previous passage, God has created us, as impressed his image upon us. And so it's up to us to transcend our lower animal selves and develop these divine potentialities that we have been given by God. Whether or not we choose to do it is something that's a consequence of our free will. We can choose to go down this path and develop our potentialities, or we can ignore them. And so what are these virtues of humanity that we should be attaining here? during our lifetimes. And well, there are a lot of them. Truthfulness, justice, purity of heart, humility, unity, love, service, steadfastness, detachment, generosity. We could have discussions on each one of these virtues, and we could go on for hours and days going on discussing them. And I would love to do that sometime. If it's a long pandemic, we'll have lots of these sessions, so maybe we'll just do that. And I had to stop because there was no more space at the bottom to go to, but there's one virtue that during my investigation and preparation for this talk really stuck out to me. And so if you'll permit me, I'm just going to read a block of text to you, but it's so moving that I thought it was really worth sharing. And this other virtue is science. The attainment of education is of extreme importance in the Baha'i faith and for humanity overall. And so let me share this passage from the Baha'i writings for you on this very topic, on this virtue. The virtues of humanity are many, but science is the most noble of them all. The distinction which man enjoys above and beyond the station of the animal is due to this paramount virtue. It is a bestowal of God. It is not material, it is divine. Science is an effulgence of the sun of reality, God. The power of investigating and discovering the verities of the universe, the means by which man finds a pathway to God. All the powers and attributes of man are human and hereditary in origin, outcomes of nature's processes, except the intellect, which is supernatural. Through intellectual and intelligent inquiry, science is the discoverer of all things. It unites present and past, reveals the history of bygone nations and events, and confers upon man today the essence of all human knowledge and attainment throughout the ages. By intellectual processes and logical deductions of reason, this superpower in man can penetrate the mysteries of the future and anticipate its happenings. Science is the first emanation from God toward man. So all created things embody the potentiality of material perfection, but the power of intellectual investigation and scientific acquisition is a higher virtue specialized to man alone. Other beings and organisms are deprived of this potentiality and attainment. God has created this love of reality in man alone. And so again, I apologize for that long block of text, but it moved me so greatly. And I hope I did the same for you, because it's not something, as I mentioned before, the harmony of science and religion is of extreme importance. And I wanted to really emphasize that. So this is great. So, okay, what do I do with all these virtues? As a human, I've done this, I've acquired them. And a core concept in the Baha'i faith is that the refinement of oneself and service to humanity are inseparable aspects of life. So we improve ourselves so that we may develop our capacities, so that we are able to serve the world in an even greater fashion. And we continue that process and continue improving and building our strengths such that we are greater servants. And so I'll share one more passage for you on that same topic. We cannot segregate the human heart from the environment outside us and say that once one of these is reformed, everything will be improved. Man is organic with the world. His inner life molds the environment and is itself also deeply affected by it. The one acts upon the other, and every abiding change in the life of man is the result of these mutual reactions. So it's not enough, it's not sufficient for us to sit there and read and deepen and study and improve ourselves. We must go out there, out into the field. We must go out and take action and serve and help humanity, bring about justice, bring about unity in the world, lift the burdens of society off of everyone's shoulders, ending poverty, ending prejudice, bringing about equality, bringing justice throughout the world, ending disparities, I should call it extreme inequality of wealth. So these are the important things that we are tasked to do in this world. And so that's a bit about the purpose of life. So there was one other question, big question on the slides or on the flyer that we were promised an answer to, and it said, "What about the universe? Why was the universe created?" And this is a deeply difficult topic to understand, at least for me. So I'm just going to mostly share quotes about this and give you my bare understanding, my very shallow understanding of this. But I'm sharing the passages with you, and maybe our group here has more to share during the Q&A. The universe hath neither beginning nor ending. Essentially meaning it's eternal. The Creator, God, has ever had a creation, and the rays have ever emanated and shone forth from the Sun of Truth, which is God again. For a lightless sun would be impenetrable darkness. The names and attributes of God require the existence of things, and no cessation in the outpouring of God's ancient grace can ever be contemplated, for this would be contrary to the divine perfection. So what's happening is, what my understanding here is that the God, the Creator, cannot be if there is no creation. Therefore, the universe has always existed. So to ask why the universe was created, well, God is a creator, but God is always there. If you are denying the creation of the universe, you're denying the perfection of God, the perfection of God, the magnificence of God, the all-powerfulness of God. Again, this is very difficult to understand, and I think there's one more slide I want to share that has an interesting twist that I find parallels with what's going on in science. There were many universal cycles preceding this one in which we are living. They were consummated, completed, and their traces obliterated. The divine and creative purpose in them was the evolution of spiritual man, just as it is in this cycle. The circle of existence is the same circle. It returns. The tree of life has ever borne the same heavenly fruits. I can't say I fully understand this quote, but my hunch, or at least my current understanding of it, is that I don't know how many of you have read about multiverses, but to me, this rings like a description of the multiverse, where universes kind of form and reform as bubbles out of this infinite stream of creation. So there you have it. That is my understanding of the creation of the universe. I think in general, it's wonderful to ponder this and think about these abstract concepts. But it's important to also focus on the here and now and what we have to do in this world, which is helping to build almost essentially God's kingdom on earth, so that we're all there isn't so much suffering. Bring about the oneness of humanity, unite all the races, unite all the nations under the banner of God, put an end to the war and struggles here. Anyway, I think I've probably gone over my time, but thank you very much. I'll pass it back to Rabbi Locker. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you, Arash. If you would
Sure.
cancel your screen share.
Sure.
Then I can.
There you go.
Thank you. So let me try and continue with our next presenter, who is my dear, dear friend of much longer time than I've known Arash, Janice Dario. Janice grew up in an insulated Italian Catholic neighborhood in Brooklyn, which we call the Old Country. It was not until she went to Hunter College in Manhattan to complete an undergraduate degree in philosophy that she met many people from diverse religious backgrounds. Then she moved to California, earning a master's degree in philosophy at the traditionally Protestant Claremont colleges, a master's degree in religious studies at Mount St. Mary's University in Los Angeles, and then completion of a PhD in philosophy back at Claremont. She thoroughly enjoyed the wide variety of opinions, beliefs of students and faculty at Moore Park College, where she taught for over 20 years, and now at California Lutheran University and St. John's Seminary. She and her husband are affiliated with St. Andrew's Abbey, a Benedictine monastery involved in ecumenical retreats and conferences. And I just want to say, oh, that's going to be me. So let me stop the share and turn it over to Janice. And I hope we've solved all of the technical problems that we were having. Great.
Okay, so am I on now, Michael?
You are. We hear you.
I'm going to do about 5 minutes, okay, because I want to wrap up what I've heard a bit, or sort of give a preface to what was said. I want to start with a story about my 2 favorite rabbis. The first one is, well, I'll have to tell you who my favorite rabbi is second. My second favorite rabbi is the guy you see on your screen now. That would be Rabbi Michael Lotker. There would not be Christianity if there were not Judaism. No Judaism, no Christianity. So there's going to be this interconnectedness between the traditions we're talking about. My favorite rabbi, of course, is Jesus, Yeshua, and how Jewish Jesus was is going to go through a whole range of different opinions. Many Christians say that understand Jesus in a very closely Jewish way, and others in a more Greek and philosophical way. But I want to, especially because Michael started with that presentation on the world, both the big view and the little view, that Christians have conflicting views about this world. Think of Dag Hammarskjöld, for instance, for all the former UN general. For all that has been, thanks. For all that will be, yes. So for many Christians, the meaning of life comes from this big yes to the world the way it is. For other Christians, this world is not so good. In fact, it's pretty bad. So they lean toward a more view of let's get through this one and get on to the next one. The range of disagreements among Christians, if I just tell you 2 anecdotes. My husband, Paul, who is a Roman Catholic and teaches at the Roman Catholic Seminary for the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, when he was on the faculty at Fuller Seminary, which is a Protestant seminary in Pasadena, he was, like the rabbi, an adjunct professor because, as they said to him, you and the rabbi are not Christians, right? And of course, Catholics have returned that favor by calling Jehovah's Witnesses not Christians. So not only is there not agreement among Christians about what Christians think the meaning of life is, but there isn't even agreement among Christians about what a Christian is. So the impossible task of trying to say something about what Christians think the meaning of life is, and I'll give you just 3 words, all of them starting with C. Creed, code, and cult. By creed, we mean some list of beliefs that Christians have. Those beliefs have to be connected with the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus in some way. Those beliefs have to be connected with the relationship between Jesus and God, whatever that is. And having those beliefs is what is part of what gives meaning to life. To know those beliefs, to know the plan that God has for us. The second C is code. The meaning of life comes from a code, meaning a certain way of living. Living according to certain rules or forms of life, like following the virtues, just being good in an ordinary sense, or perhaps being pious. And the final one is cult, from the French word cult, having nothing to do with the way we use the word cult in English, meaning different ways that we relate to the transcendent. And that has to do with some kind of connection, some kind of way of prayer, usually ritualistic. And that is what gives life meaning. We accept God's plan for the universe. We accept that God is the creator. I noticed that our Rosh mentions that the universe is eternal. And just as one last point, then I'm going to be quiet. In the Middle Ages, the most prominent Christian philosopher, the most prominent Muslim philosopher, and the most prominent Jewish philosopher discussed that very question, whether the universe is eternal or it had a beginning. Short answer is all three of those traditions had people who argued for both a yes and a no answer to, is the universe eternal? So, and here's my last tribute to my second, and I want that noted, second favorite rabbi, Michael Otker, that for me, the kind of Christian that I am is inspired by Judaism in this way. I like the fight. I like the conversation. I like the dialogue. I like the way in which intelligent, open-minded, loving, lovable people get together and discuss what matters. And that, I think, might be the meaning of life.
I'm pausing because I'm writing notes. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. That was wonderful. I need to, okay, here we go. Okay, so thank you very much. I have been introduced, so I won't belabor it. By the way, I do have, however, a simple answer to every question that you might ask about any religious tradition. And the answer is God knows. If you can't answer the question, you just say, God knows, smile thoughtfully, and bow your head in prayer. But I won't surrender to that for my own challenge of answering these questions. In Jewish tradition, and I've heard similar ideas from Christians with whom I have dialogue, there are two answers to the question of why God created the universe. And this imagines that God preceded the creation of the universe. So I think it's a little different than the Bahá'í understanding as we heard it. So God, the universe is all God and nothing else. God decides to create a universe. So the question is why? There are two answers, one I really don't like, one I really like. The one I don't like is, if God is to be praised, then God needs somebody to praise God. That presents God as a bit egotistical and self-centered, and so I'm not crazy about that idea. The one I really like is the idea that God likes stories. It's been presented as God is lonely. God is a God of relationship. You can add sophistication to this, but for some reason, God knows, God wanted to be in relationship with a physical world and not simply a world where it was all God and only God. So we have in the book of Genesis, which is certainly part of Jewish tradition and Christian tradition, actually two stories of creation, but I really want to focus on the first story, which is one of 6 days of creation. And unlike creation stories that preceded Judaism, Babylonian myths and other myths, those creation stories were violent. There were gods fighting with each other. They were hacking each other. Humanity and the earth came out of the belly, I think, of one monster in the Gilgamesh story. So humanity is sort of a byproduct of a violent clash, and there's lots of violence and disorder. Contrast that with Genesis 1. On the first day is this. On the second day is this. God speaks everything into existence. And the culmination of this process is humanity. So humanity is not a byproduct, but a culmination. And in the end of chapter 1 of Genesis, we are taught that God created humanity in God's image, male and female, both created at once. In the mystical creation, in the mystical narrative, so this now, some of you know about Kabbalah, and I taught a class on Kabbalah, it's on my website, and I'll teach more. So in Kabbalah, there's a very interesting myth, and a myth is a sacred story. It may be true, it may not be true, and that when God created the universe, something went wrong. God got so excited. pouring divine energy into vessels especially created to hold the divine energy, that a cosmic accident takes place. In Hebrew, this is called shivirat hakelim, the smashing of the vessels. And something goes awry, and that's why we have problems in the world. And so, as you'll see, the purpose of humanity is to fix those problems. And the thought is given in Kabbalah, in Jewish mysticism, that every time you do something good, that you repair a little bit of the universe, a little bit of the vessel, and a divine spark is released. So when you kind to someone, when you feed someone that's hungry, when you help heal someone, when you teach someone, when you inspire someone, when you just compliment someone and help them get through their day, this is not just a friendly good thing you're doing, but this has cosmic significance. You are actually healing the universe. In terms of the meaning of life, Judaism grants the world an amazing gift 3,200 years ago. A group of newly freed slaves has an astounding insight, and that insight is history is supposed to have direction. Think about it. If you're a slave in a cave, you're a cave dweller. If you're a slave to Pharaoh, if you're a serf, your life is exactly the same. The idea that your life will be better than your parents and your children and grandchildren will be better than yours is absurd. Your life is an unending drudgery of trying to survive one day into the next. This group of newly freed slaves have an astounding insight, and that insight is this is not the way it's supposed to be. We are supposed to make the world a little bit better day after day, generation after generation. The meaning of life, as I understand Jewish tradition, is in some ways Arash's words, but in Hebrew, l'taken olam b'malchut Shaddai, to perfect the world under the kingship, under the rulership of God. To support this movement in the direction of salvation and redemption. But in Judaism, salvation and redemption is not what happens to me in the next life. It's about my work in this life. Janice referred to this in Christianity, 43,000 different movements. Janice, good job of representing all of them. There is a lot of focus in many of the movements on the next life, the next world. The biggest difference between Judaism and Christianity, and I wrote a book for Christians about this, is in Judaism, our focus is on this world. We might have some great questions. We can have a great discussion. What's the nature of the afterlife? And let's say we can't come to an agreement on what's the nature of the afterlife. You believe in heaven and hell. You believe in 7 levels of heaven. You believe in 3 levels of heaven. You believe in Gehenna, where you're punished for a year, or purgatory. We can't come to an agreement. Is that a problem? No, it's not a problem at all. But if we're all traditional Orthodox Jews, and now it's time to eat, and we can't agree if this chicken is kosher, that's a big problem. We can't eat. If you can't eat, it's a big problem. So Judaism is obsessive compulsive, I take that literally, about what we're supposed to do in this world, and not so worried about the nature of the next world. One of the most astounding insights of Kabbalah, of Jewish mysticism, is the idea that God cannot repair the world by God's self. God has made us partners in the creation of the world, and we have free will to accept that partnership or reject that partnership. We can build gas chambers or we can build hospitals. One of the reasons why, as a scientist, I don't think science is the highest value is because science is amoral. The height of science and engineering in the last century was Germany. They were the best scientists in the world. They managed to get the cost of murder down to about ½ penny per life by using a gas called Zyklon B. And these brilliant scientists even cut that cost less for children, because instead of gassing babies, they would just burn them alive in the crematoria rather than having to waste ½ cent worth of gas on them. This was brilliant engineering. Science itself can do wonderful things, or as we have seen, it can do horrible things. So to me, science without ethics and morality, which I believe come from God, is a tool, but not an end. The meaning of my life. I love the mystical insight that the universe is like a puzzle, and we each have a piece of the puzzle to play, to insert in this enormous jigsaw puzzle called the universe. And if you don't do your job may be as a teacher, your job may be as a nurse, as a doctor, as a comedian, as a singer, as a poet, as a house painter, whatever your profession is, that may not have to do with the critical role that you play in your life. The critical role you may play in your life might be to inspire a friend to keep going, particularly these days. And Jewish mystical tradition teaches that if we don't play our little puzzle piece, who knows how many thousands of years it may be before someone else comes along. Our job is nothing short of redemption of the universe, making the universe more like the one God had in mind. But our tradition teaches, Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor. It's not up to you to complete the task. V'lo ata ben chorim lehivatel mimena. But no one is exempt from doing something. So everyone has to do something. So I believe the meaning of my life is to use those particular skills and gifts that I've received, unearned, you can call them gift of grace. I have a set of skills to make the world around me a better place. And I recognize that I can have a greatest influence on those closest to me, on family and friends and community. And I'm not free to do nothing. It's not my job to do everything, and I'm not free to do nothing. I want to begin by allowing my colleagues, Arash and Janice, to reflect. And I just want to begin that a little bit by thanking Janice about this insight of what is fun is the fight, the dialogue, the connection. The word Israel, which you've heard of, comes from the Bible. It's Yisrael. It comes when Jacob gets his name changed after wrestling with a being which may be God, it may be an angel, or it may be a person. And Yaakov's name is changed from the heel, because he was born holding onto his twin brother's heel, to Yisrael, which means one who wrestles with God. So if you've got problems with God, if you come to me, as many people have, and other clergy, and say, Rabbi, Father, Pastor, why did God do? And then just insert, the rest of your sentence. How could God do that to me, to us, to the family, to life, and so on? I've got big problems with this God. If you come and say that to me, my response is, welcome to the club. By the way, the name of our club is God Wrestlers. That's what we do. We wrestle with God. And in the wrestling, we get better insights into the nature of one another and into the nature of God. So having said that, I want to offer an opportunity for Arash and Janice to comment. And you are both unmuted, so you can just speak up.
Okay. Arash, do you want to go?
No, you go first, please.
Okay, just a few things. First of all, the last thing that Rabbi Lotker just said reminded me of a story I heard from Bishop Robert Barron, who's the most watched Catholic priest in English in the world on YouTube and other sites. He tells a story about a woman who was in the parking lot of her church throwing rocks at a statue of Jesus. All right, now, some Christians are into statues. It's not my thing, but so somebody said to the priest there, why don't you go out there and stop that woman from throwing rocks at the statue? And the priest said, don't stop her, she's praying. And I thought that was brilliant. It's having that conversation with God and not letting up and being really authentic about it and not some kind of phony, hypocritical, pious stuff. So that's one story. Then 3 B's. First B, I want to quote a Jew, Anne Frank. People are basically good. That is the orientation of one of the two streams in Christianity. That natural inclinations are trustworthy. The other stream, of course, is that people are basically bad. Since during this pandemic, I have way too much time, like the rest of you, I just Googled around the website of two churches in our area, and I looked at their mission statements. Quite an insight. So here's the mission statement from one of the ones. This is a community within 25 miles of here. We believe that all people are sinners by nature. That was one of their main beliefs on their mission statement, or what we believe. And then on a church just a few blocks away, here's what it said on their mission statement. We believe in the goodness of people, even though there really is sin in the world. Okay, so you could see this tension and these tugs. And these are all under the silo, let's say, of Christianity. Okay, the second B is beauty. A woman that I admire very much, Dorothy Day, who was both deeply spiritual, as in the sense of very prayerful, but also a community organizer, a pacifist, and arrested as a communist. The title of her biography is from Dostoevsky. The world will be saved by beauty. And if you want to know what God is like, afterwards, go to look at the flash mob for the Berklee School of Music. All right, it's about 5 minutes. You know what a flash mob is, right? Michael, you're too old to know what a flash mob is. So Michael's younger than I am. So flash mob, the Berklee School of Music, and God will be there. All right. And then the third B is basic Christianity. One of the most sold books in the world is, as you may know, C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity, which is supposed to be the most absolute basic Christianity. Well, that's a particular kind of Christianity. There's nothing very basic about, I mean, there are basics there, but there are people who are legitimately Christians who would disagree with that, including me, some of those. And then here's a more recent one. It's called Simply Christian by a guy named N.T. Wright, a great Bible scholar. And again, there is no simply Christian. There are various Christian views. That doesn't just mean that we can't, that we must be silent. No, we have to take sides, but there's going to be disagreement. That's me.
Okay, Arash.
I just have a couple points to add, just to add to the conversation, things I may have left out. I think I liked Rabbi Lotker's point about science by itself is useless, actually. I mean, not useless, but science by itself devolves into just a slough of materialism, and faith is required with science to be a productive tool for humanity. Actually, I'd like to share a quote that puts it in a much better phrasing than I. Religion and science are the two wings upon which man's intelligence can soar into the heights, with which the human soul can progress. It is not possible to fly with one wing alone. Should a man try to fly with the wing of religion alone, he would quickly fall into the quagmire of superstition. Whilst on the other hand, with the wing of science alone, he would also make no progress, but fall into the despairing slough of materialism. And as Rabbi Lotker so clearly painted that picture of that, yes, whenever humanity detaches from God and loses focus on religion, science just turns into this horrible device that creates, nuclear weapons for destruction instead of nuclear energy, for example, or we find more efficient ways of killing, we create more violent weapons, more gases, as Rabbi Lotker said. Without ethics, no question about it. Without religion, science is a dangerous tool without it. So we need that to guide us. Science tells you lets you get there, tells you how to get there or figure out how to get there or what to do. but it doesn't tell you why or if you should be getting there and what to do. I was wondering, this is a question to our host. Should we be going through the questions in the chat, or how?
So what I would say is let's finish up this period where we comment, the three of us, and then Tim, what our plan was, Tim will read some questions, and then, depending on how things go, we can open up the floor for participation, but we're not quite sure, but that's the general plan.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else to add, Arash?
No, that's...
So
good.
With the discussion, by the way, Dr. Dario, I love the story, the adding a story. One of my teachers, Larry Kushner, a mystic, says he will believe in artificial intelligence and computer assisted or computer intelligence when you ask the computer a question, the computer responds by, that reminds me of a story. So I love that.
Yeah.
I want to quote, with the discussion of science, I was thinking of writing a book on science and religion, and I realized a better one has already been written. And that book is actually called The Great Partnership by Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, the former chief rabbi of Great Britain. And he has a wonderful quote among many in there. And that quote is, science takes things apart to see how they work. Thank you, Janice. Religion puts things together to see what they mean. So I think that is a guiding insight from me. I want to comment also on Dr. Dario's point about whether people are good or bad. Here's one where, shock of shocks, I think Judaism has it exactly right. Judaism doesn't say we're either good or we're bad. Judaism speaks of what is called a Yetzer Tov and a Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Tov is the inclination toward goodness, toward doing good things. The Yetzer Hara is sometimes translated as the instinct toward evil, but Ra really means more self-gratification, selfishness, chaos. I think it would, I'm not a psychologist, but maybe what Freud called the id. And they're at war with each other. Judaism understands that these inclinations are at war with each other. And the purpose of religion, or a purpose of religion, is to strengthen the Yetzer Tov, the impulse for goodness, and to help it control the Yetzer Hara. But in one wonderful story, here's another story from the Talmud, the rabbis managed to trap the Yetzer Hara. They trapped the Yetzer, the evil inclination, and they put it in a cage. And they're very happy about this until they realize nobody goes to work. Nobody has any desire for any material things, so they're happy just to do nothing. The sexual urge is completely gone. Even in the animal kingdom, the sexual urge is gone. The rabbis say that the hens stop laying eggs. So without the Yetzer Hara, the world stops turning, figuratively speaking. So they ask God, can we have a weakened virus, a weakened vaccine for this Yetzer Hara virus, so that it won't be so powerful? And God says, no, sorry, take it or leave it. And the rabbis reluctantly release the Yetzer Hara into the world. And we struggle. We struggle with our internal natures. And Judaism is a force, or religion is a force to strengthen our better nature. I'll say one more word about religion, then turn it over to Tim. The English word religion comes from the same root as the word for ligament. Religion is that which binds us together. It helps us bear what is unbearable. At many funerals, people will be too choked up to speak, and they'll use a word, please bear with me. And I always take that quite literally, because what they're going through is unbearable. They can't bear it alone. That's why they're asking us to bear it with them. Life is very difficult, if not impossible, to bear alone. We're having more than a slight taste of what it means to be alone these days. And we realize the truth of the power of religion as religion as a ligament that joins us together. So I think one of the purposes of religion is to help us get through, the slings and arrows of our daily lives, and to be more human. religion is sometimes criticized as a crutch. And I applaud religion as a crutch, because if you've got a bad leg, a crutch is a wonderful thing to have. And so religion too is a crutch. It helps us get through the difficulties of this life when they are hard to bear alone. So our general plan is to now have some time to
Terry is
respond.
Terry's going to ask the questions, Mike.
Okay, great, Terry. Thank you.
So, okay.
Thank you. Yeah, sure.
And I'm going to start at the bottom. I actually came out, this is selfish, but it just runs from what you were just talking about from the Yetzer and the Hara. And my question is to Janice, and then probably Arash can follow with this from Baha'i teachings. But I immediately went to Romans chapter 7. And does that describe the inherent good and evil, this Yetzer and Hara that Rabbi Mike was describing?
It's always tricky to quote the Bible because the Bible could support any number of positions.
Well, should I say that says that I wish all the things I would like to do good, I don't do, and the things I don't want to do, I do. Who's going to save me from myself?
Right. And then there are other places in the Bible which might imply there are places in the Bible that might imply two different answers to that same question. So to say, for a church to say that it's a Bible church is merely to say that the Bible is an authority, of course, but there are many different ways to read the Bible, even many different ways to correctly read the Bible. I think that looking at, I'll just give you an example. This morning, the readings in my tradition, there could be a choice between Romans, someone could have read from Romans, or the reading could have been from the Song of Songs. Every year when this is the choice on July 23rd, I always pray that it's going to be the Song of Songs reading, and they always do the Romans one. And that's because many Christians are oriented toward, I'm sorry to say, a moralistic view of their religion, whereas I'm oriented, I'll just say, toward beauty. So beauty is a surer insight, and this love relationship between God and God's people. Of course, Michael, as you know, Christians ate your Bible and then added something to it. Mm-hmm. So the Song of Songs, as a friend of mine used to put it, is the hermeneutical key to the Bible. This love song between God and God's people. And again, the beauty of it is to stay in that love song. You know, when the lover is talking to the beloved, he's not thinking about what his answer is going to be when she challenges him on a question. It's look at how beautiful her eyes are, you know, and that I think is the inroad.
So I can't resist commenting on the Song of Songs, because one of the things Jews and Christians did together was to take what is clearly erotic love poetry and make it sound religious. So the Jews understand it as an allegory between the love of God for Israel. So the lover's two breasts become the two tablets of the law. Of course, what else could they possibly be? And I think in Christian thought, it's the church, and I don't remember the Christian interpretation. This was such a dangerous book that one of our leading rabbis say, if you think it's erotic love poetry, you forfeit your share in the world to come. But I love the Song of Songs because it is clearly eros to me, and we can understand it allegorically. And one of my teachers say it is now the new marching orders for sexuality. The old marching orders for sexuality, which was in Genesis 1, was be fruitful and multiply and dominate the earth. And we did it. Thanks. Check that one off our bucket list. We were probably too fruitful. We multiplied very, very well, and we've done a fantastic job of dominating the earth. So this rabbi says that our next marching orders now are the Song of Songs, which is love, be loved, and enjoy the sensuality that is inherent in the human experience. And Kabbalah, by the way, is a very erotic and sensual has a very erotic and sexual and sensual overtones, because the rabbis of Jewish mysticism understood the power of sensuality and sexuality. Sorry, I need to go take a cold shower.
Well, I was going to say, on that note, we wanted to ask if Arash wants to add anything. I don't know, Arash.
I don't think I have anything to add. I'm not.
Oh,
But thanks for the opportunity.
But I am going to go back to you, Arash, right now, because one of the first questions we got was right after you spoke, and it was, why would God need to be worshipped? If God wants us to know it, why be out of touch? If God wants us to know it, why be out of touch?
Sure. Well, it's not that God is out of touch. God doesn't keep herself out of touch from us. And I purposely say herself and herself, and I swap that because we shouldn't get too comfortable with that. God is not a man or a woman. God is above man or woman or gender. God is greater than us, you know. So anyway, I'm gonna say her for now. God educates us through these divine educators. She sends us Abraham. She sends us Moses, Christ, Muhammad, the Bab and Baha'u'llah, the Buddha. These divine educators come to us from time to time as a way for us to know God, so God can give us these instructions for living, the divine prescription, as we often say. And so that is how we that is how we get to know God, and it's not so much of a be enthralled and be miserable at the feet of God or something. It's not like that very old view of worship. Worship is, for example, service to humanity, work in service to humanity as well. Something that's productive for the common weal of society is considered worship. It's not a life of asceticism or some sort of you don't have to take a vow of poverty to be worshiping God. And additionally, you know, God's creation, again, God created us out of love. It wasn't God didn't need us to be created. It wasn't, and I think this might be one spot where we differ. It wasn't out of loneliness. God, it was created out of love. It was, the painter loved to paint, so they painted. The baker loved to bake, so they baked. God is self-sufficient, and God doesn't need anything. It does not depend on anything. So that was. I hope that answers the question well enough.
So Arash, I hear a tension in your answer. The painter loves to paint. The painter is not self-sufficient. Painter has to paint.
Sure.
So I hear you saying, and I love this, that God's essence is to love, and therefore there must be an object of that love. So I would say, in that sense, I don't understand how God would be self-sufficient if God has an overriding desire to love something that's not God.
So a painter being self-sufficient is that's just where the metaphor breaks down, because we live in this material world. So I'm not sure that matches. But you can love something. I love to go biking. I love to have some favorite foods and every now and then, but I don't have to have those things. But I do it because I love it, and I can do it. God, I guess I don't see the paradox in the question. To me, it seems very clear that you can love something and not be dependent upon it. Yeah.
No, I love your image of God just wanting to burst forth. Maybe God would be okay being by God's self, but this desire to love, I think, is a beautiful image. My own view on this idea of God needing to be worshipped is just an archaic image. The writers of the Bible, the people living at this time, imaged God as a king, a very, very prominent term in the Jewish prayer book. Melech Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. God was imaged as a parent and as a king. And of course, you speak to a king in very worshipful terms. I mean, you might even call him your worship, your majesty, his excellency, and so on. So I think it's an archaic notion. That's why I don't like it.
Yeah, I mean, there's also, I mean, I think whenever we're talking about God and these things that are greater than us, that we discuss this with our minds, with the vocabulary we have. Even there are languages, even, let me give you a great example. My wife is Hmong, and the Hmong language is a very simple language. So even then, there are things that just simply do not translate well because they just do not have the vocabulary for it. We were trying to translate some stuff into Hmong, and we're like, there's no word, there's just no word for that. That is not a concept there. And so when we discuss these things that are greater than us, that are, when we discuss God, the divine, we're doing it in the limited vocabulary we have, in the limited concepts that we can conceptualize. We are being educated by these divine educators God has sent us in the ways that we are able to understand it. So if an answer is not perfect, it could be that we don't understand it. It could also be that simply we don't have the ability to grasp it. Even the Bahá'í writings, that we're told that God is unknowable. Ultimately, it's not like we're going to die and we're going to go see God standing right in front of us. We're going to proceed to an afterlife, and we're getting closer. And a part of our journey in life is to get closer to God. And now we're pulling back strands from our university forum a couple of years ago, talking about the afterlife. But it's God is ultimately unknowable to us. So these are just the words that we use, and the metaphors we use to the best of our ability, I think. Yeah.
So I'm going to move on because our time's limited. Janice, did you want to add to this at all, or are you good? Unmute yourself. Janice, unmute.
Oops.
Can't hear you.
You're good.
There you go.
Okay, there you go. Okay. No, just that God is, if for Christians, I guess it would be somewhat correct to say God is knowable and somewhat correct to say that God is unknowable, but probably Christianity historically leans in the direction of God is knowable. After all, we make these statements about him.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm going to move on. There was some.
Just one other thing.
All right, Janice.
I'm sorry, I just remembered this. The image of a king doesn't bother me when I think of fairy tales. I loved fairy tales when I was like a 12, 13, 14-year-old. And the king was always a good king. And and in some cases, the cases I like the best, he went about his people in disguise, doing good for them. Now that's a king I can really, wrap my mind around. Okay.
Yes.
And EOM, end of
So, and that's how we would, as Christians, we would think of Jesus as that good guy doing good for us. So we had some questions about the universe, and I'm going to ask that we probably keep our answers a little more succinct if possible so we can move on. In the Baha'i, is God's existence everywhere? And that's for all of you.
I'll just go first. In the Baha'i writings, it says God is closer to us than our life vein, and actually, I believe it even says in the Quran the same thing. We are closer. I believe it's in Quran 50:16.
Yeah.
That God is closer to us than we are even to ourselves. So there's a spiritual understanding to that, and then there's a physical understanding. Spiritually, God is closer to us than ourselves, knows everything about us, but physically, God is not a physical embodiment here, but God is omnipresent. So that's one of those divine mysteries.
So before Janice or Rabbi Mike speaks, there was a particular question for the Baha'i tradition. Does God exist within the universe? And I think you just answered that.
Yeah, I think that's,
Yeah. Okay. Did Janice or Rabbi Mike would like to speak to that?
Yeah, again, there's huge range of opinion. Remember, we have to decide what's kosher and what's not kosher. We don't have to agree on what's the nature of God. So in the Bible, God is clearly not everywhere because God is wandering in the Garden of Eden. God doesn't know that people are going to turn out bad and so on. The idea that God is, I sometimes call it the three O's, omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent, comes to Judaism through Islam about 1,000 years ago. And I love the mystical, in the image of God, the idea of God has two very distinct and very different senses in Judaism. One is God is up there in heaven, we're down here. Every Jewish blessing begins with Baruch Atah Adonai. Blessed are you, Adonai. So clearly there's a you and there's a me. But the essential insight of Kabbalah is the statement, God is one. And the Hebrew word for one is echad, and I have an entire book with 25 essays on the meaning of that word, echad. And the mystical insight is that God is unity. Everything in the universe is God. The distinctions are apparent, but they are not real. So a wave looks different, looks like it's a separate entity from the ocean, but we know the wave is one with the ocean. We may look like we're different and separate people and separate from the trees and separate from the stars and, you know, that whole range of the universe out to 12 billion light years and down to a few femtometers. But in fact, it's all God. Everything is God. That's, I would say, the essential teaching of Jewish mysticism.
Just one sentence with one term. The term is panentheism. So there's your homework, boys and girls. Look up panentheism, not pantheism, panentheism, like pantheism, but with E-N in the middle. And the way a monk put it to me once is that God is as close to us, as Arash was saying, and as it says in the Quran, without being us. So a relationship, right? End of message.
Since we are working with this universal thing, somebody asked a particular question for Arash, and it's the first verse of the Bible describes the Big Bang. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Given your faith's importance on science, which you stated, how can you say that the universe always existed, given the vast amount of data supporting the Big Bang? Thank you.
Sure, yeah. Well, the Big Bang, I don't disagree with the Big Bang at all, actually. I think that perfectly fits. The Big Bang was 13.8 billion years ago. And when the Big Bang happened, there was actually no time before. So, you know, the Big Bang had was started as a singularity, and it could have collapsed in on itself, but it exploded out. So during that first 10 to the negative 36 seconds or 10 to the negative 50 seconds, there was no time. There was no, even modern physics did not exist. The standard model, the relative model were not things at that time. So there was no time. And scientists still don't even know what happened there. Hawking put forward a theory about the no boundary theorem, which states that the universe always existed, that there was no before. And so I don't see a disagreement, actually. And and even the Big Bang Theory proponents also can acknowledge the multiverse theory. So again, I don't see a conflict. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. So, and so did everything in the universe fall into place by coincidence? That comes from that Big Bang Theory idea, or was there a plan? And these are actual questions I got. So
one of the things that I will comment on is not next Wednesday, but a week from Wednesday, I'm going to be having 3 sessions on science and religion. And a very important first part of that whole discussion is just this question: is if there's no creator, and by creator, by God, I mean a organizing intelligence in the universe. If there's no creator, then we have a scientific accident and coincidence. And you can actually ask questions of probability about what is the likelihood that happened. So I call that whole thing the evidence for the existence of God, and we'll spend more than an hour going through that stuff. Just to give you the bottom line, one famous physicist said, the idea that the universe exists by accident is like a tornado ripping through a junkyard and creating a fully formed 747. But that's a subject we can actually investigate. So I would say, looking strictly at the science, the likelihood that it's an accident is vanishingly small. And the only way out of that conundrum is the multiverse theory, which says there's a gazillion, bazillion, fill the universe with zeros, other universes, and we just happen to live, thank God, I would say, in the one where there's life and we actually exist. The problem I have, Arash, with the multiverse theory is there's no way to test it. By definition, the universes can't interact with each other. Yeah. And my understanding of science is if you have a scientific theory which by its essence cannot be tested, it's not science.
Unrepeated.
Can I just say something about the previous question, just 30 seconds?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
The first book of the Bible, the first chapter of the Bible, does not say anything which has to do with affirming or denying the beginning of a universe. What it has to do with is utter dependence on God. The way that Augustine put it was, if the universe was eternal and there was an eternal foot in the sand in an eternal desert, the footprint is always completely dependent on the foot, even if they're eternal. The way that Richard Taylor, a modern philosopher, put it is, if the sun was eternal and the moon was eternal, the moon is always dependent on the sun for its light. So the first chapter shows the dependence of everything on God. It's not a scientific statement affirming a beginning.
And just to make it more confusing, it's impossible to translate the first phrase of the Bible. There's an inherent grammatical error in there, in the Hebrew. And one of our teachers from about 1,000 years ago explains that God put that error in there to encourage us to interpret rather than simply translate.
So we are getting late on time. It's 8:30, and I have a couple of questions that I really don't want to ignore. So if you can bear with us, we're losing a few people, and Mike needs to finish as moderator. And these two have to do with the end of time and evil and good. So are you ready to take them and take them pretty briefly if possible? So of all faith traditions, will the earth ever be destroyed by God in any of these traditions? Does it speak about the earth being destroyed by God?
Christianity, read the last two chapters of the book of Revelation, a new heaven and a new earth. I would say a improved earth, not a destruction. Destruction and God don't go together.
Arash?
Yeah, there's no, God will not destroy earth. There's nothing in the Bahá'í faith.
And I would say one of God's covenants to Noah is that the earth will not be destroyed by flood. Haven't talked about thermonuclear weapons in the book of Genesis. So there are no guarantees.
So possibly man destroying the earth, not necessarily God. So that's yeah. And then the final question, will God win his battle with evil in the end, or will it be an ongoing conflict? Should I read that?
I just want to again make one more plug for a very good book. It's called When Science Meets Religion by Ian Barber, and it gives you 4 models of science and religion, but I want to use one of those. The model for understanding our relationship with God is not conflict. It's not a fight. It's not a battle. It's the Song of Songs. It's a love duet.
Yeah, and I would say generally, Judaism says in the end of days, whenever that is, the Messiah will come and everyone will come to know God. But don't lose any sleep. We still have a lot of work to do. And again, mysticism says God needs us to bring about those days. Arash, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say that there's no, I think I'm just mirroring what Dr. Dario said. There's no, God is not in any sort of battle with anything, or that it's just not something in. Just not.
So I tend to think of it, and I'm not on this panel, but I know how much I love my children and how much I hurt when they are hurting. And when we hurt ourselves, I think that's how God feels for us, is like his child. So I'm going to finish up here by one more question, Rabbi, and I'll let you finish. But this was the very beginning after you showed that video. Somebody asked if they could get a copy of the video. So,
well, for one thing, there is this whole session is going to be recorded, and just look. I forgot what it's. I don't recall how to figure out. But if you now, I don't remember how to I bet I do. Let's see.
So Rabbi, what I can say is you can send it to us and the webmaster
Yes.
will send it out.
Yes.
So that will work. And I will let you
Yeah,
finish
just
before we-
the thing to Google is Cosmic Eye.
I like you see.
I like you see. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Will you take it from here and take us on out?
I will. And I want to thank my colleagues, Dr. Dario and Arash Payan, and all of you for coming. We had no idea how many people would come.
Yeah.
This is our first venture into this brave new world of doing things virtually. So we're happy that so many people came and stayed. I want to just put on the screen, let's see, from the current slide. Okay, so generally what's coming up in our future sessions. So our general plan is to have sessions, I think, on the fourth Friday. Helton's, correct me if I'm wrong, the fourth Friday of every month. And we're going to alternate between presenting a service of one of our communities. So on August 27th at 7 p.m., we are going to be introduced to the practice of Nichiren Buddhism, and then also, I think, have a video about a service. And our plan is to do other services. We don't have anything particularly scheduled in that regard.
Mike,
And
that's
then-
every
Yeah.
Thursday.
Every fourth Thursday. Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
not
sorry.
Friday.
Okay, thank you. And then the following month on the fourth Thursday, we're going to have a forum on the same questions, but instead of the three you heard from today, we will hear from Islam, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is not Trinitarian. It's Christian, but not Trinitarian. From the Church of Scientology and Unitarian Universalists. So that ought to be very interesting. Same questions from different perspectives. And then I got permission to plug my own things. So as I alluded to this, beginning in a week from this coming Wednesday on August 5th, 3 sessions, Science and Religion, Conflicts, Confusion, and Clarity. So this is my take on the subject of science and religion. And then following that, I'm going to begin a detailed look, introduction to Judaism, which will begin with 3 sessions that are a very broad overview of a taste of Judaism, a session on God, a session on Torah, and a session on Israel, and then 15 more detailed sessions. So it's quite an entree into the world of Judaism, and I'll just give you a warning. I was more or less an unconscious and disinterested Jew until I took a course like this, and it clearly I went off the deep end. The other thing I'll just mention, in case any of you want to drop by, every weekday from 4 to 5 p.m., I have office hours on Zoom. And the easiest way to figure out how to get to my office hours is just to go to my website, and it will be pretty clear from that how to get it. And you can also email me through the website. Does everybody see the website right now?
Yep.
Yes? Okay. So here's my basic website. If you want the details on the classes, you just click there, and then click here to be transported. Here's all the information. And then I have recorded classes up the kazoo, including illicit sexual encounters in the Bible. That should be a fun one. So anyway, so thank you so much. It has been a pleasure and an honor to be with you all, and we hope to see you back at subsequent sessions, and also just when the haze lifts and we have in-person meetings, to join us in our interfaith discussions. Tim, you want to add anything in closing?
Just that if you were interested in any more Ventura County Interfaith community offerings, go to VCC's. Let me try that again. Go to vcic.info, www.vcic.info, and join our mailing list, and we'll keep you posted on what's coming up. Thanks, Mike. Thanks,
Okay.
Rosh. Thanks, Janice.
Thank you, everybody. It's nice to share the virtual dais with Rabbi Lottker and Dr. Barrio.
Hey.
Thank you. It's nice to share the dais with Mecca. And
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.